Just stay curious. Don't close your mind to what's happening in the technology market. Open it up a little bit. Stay curious on how things may be better with some of the technology that we're coming up with. And I think that's the most important part. Don't close our minds.
Welcome to the Disruptive Innovators Champions of Digital Business podcast, where IT and digital leaders from around the world talk about their careers, their inspiration, and their vision for the future of digital business. I'm your host, David Wright. The world of digital business is evolving faster than ever, and I want this to be a place where digital business champions create a village to band together and help each other navigate the ever-changing terrain. Disruptive Innovators features conversations with CIOs and digital leaders from around the world, diving into their personal backstory, career, their current role, trends they've been seeing, and their vision for the future, personally, professionally, and otherwise. This podcast is made for people who are seeing how quickly the digital business landscape is evolving. Those who recognize that it takes a village of trusted advisors to navigate this ever-changing terrain. People who enjoy listening to high-level discussions surrounding what it means to be a leader, real-world examples of challenges faced, and industry-specific strategies leveraged to create exceptional business outcomes. This episode is brought to you by Disruptive Innovations, a leading tech consulting firm that helps enterprise organizations with their IT strategy, process optimization, and workflow improvement. Contact them and find out more at disruptiveinnovations.net.
Good afternoon, friends. David Wright here, and I am your host of the Disruptive Innovators Champions of Digital Business podcast. And today I am lucky enough to be joined by my friend Frank Sweeney. Frank, pleasure to have you on.
Pleasure to be here.
Absolutely, man. Frank, for those of our listeners who may not be familiar, would you mind just sharing a little bit about your current role?
Sure, I'm the Chief Information Officer for the Department of Child Safety in Arizona. And my key role is to manage and innovate the digital assets for the agency. So all the technology I manage, as well as the resources that manage the technology.
For sure. And when my team suggested I get in touch with you, I was excited. My mother's nonprofit does a lot of work with state agencies, mainly in New Jersey, because that's where they're based. But being that they support pregnant women, often with children themselves already. So anyway, I appreciate your mission and excited to learn more about how you guys are affecting change in that arena. But before we get into kind of what you're up to today, just want to first and foremost kick the episode off with one piece of actionable advice you might look to leave everybody with today.
Wow, that's an open-ended question. I think the most important thing to lead with is stay curious, because I think so often when we hear new things that are coming into the market, especially technology, what happens is that we revert to what's comfortable to us. And I think everybody has that, especially as I'm in my early 50s. As we age, we get more comfortable in our routines and what's normal and standard and whatnot, and tend to shy away from things that are new simply because they're frightening, especially when we're talking about artificial intelligence and whatnot. So I would hope that everybody that listens would come away with this thought. Just stay curious. Don't close your mind to what's happening in the technology market. Open it up a little bit. Stay curious on how things may be better with some of the technology that we're coming up with. And I think that's the most important part. Don't close our minds.
Love that. It's great advice. And for me, I would say it's rooted in humility, really. Staying a lifelong learner and, not being so set. And I think there's two sides for me to resistance to change, right? There's the side you're talking about, which is I'm comfortable here, it works. And then there's the other side where it's like, yes, I'm comfortable here, it works, and it's the right way to do things. This is what we're doing for now. And the leaders that I respect and appreciate the most, like yourself, acknowledge the fact that we're at another technology renaissance right now, right? It's great advice to start. And that's why we asked that question, because it's just like a banger to start off the episode. And Frank, I want to learn a little bit more about your story, how you started out in your career and how you got to the point that you're at in your life and career today.
You don't have 3 hours though. That's
Give me the cliff notes.
well, I was born and raised in a farming community outside of Green Bay, Wisconsin. So to say that we had technology, it would be a lie. And if we had a color TV, the color TV was the old knobs and tube TV where you couldn't lift it up with a forklift. I was that heavy. And so I grew up very off the beaten track when it comes to technology. And you probably are thinking, how did I ever get to this point where I'm a big AI advocate and a pro innovator and whatnot? I had the fortunate opportunity to witness the first renaissance, which was basically the personal computer when it came out. And our school was one of the first to get Apple as a computer. And so I spent long hours playing those games, those kind of cryptic games with you do a couple of answers and the apple would fall or be put on the tree and whatnot. And so I got really curious, again, that word curious, I got really curious about what this thing was sitting in front of me, how this box was going to change the way I was going to learn and maybe give me a different direction in life. But I didn't really think, or obviously I was small at that time. And I went to college thinking I was going to be a history professor. At least that was my dream. I wanted to be, I saw Indiana Jones. I wanted to be Dr. Jones. So I went for history instead of technology. And in college, again, I had the Renaissance where the internet was starting to come of age. And so got really involved in some of the local or the actual politics of the school, getting the internet for the school, and actually participating in the first trials of the internet during college. And so that really started drifting me towards technology. I know it's hard to believe because you're a history major and you're thinking, how did that happen? I started taking an internship with Arthur Anderson. At that time, that was a big deal. And the first me to a lot of technology. And they said, this is the future. You have to learn this stuff. And I got really enamored with it. But the problem is I was already 4 years into my history degree. I took my history degree. I had a double major in history and political science. And the first job out of college I took with Arthur Anderson. Of course, they moved me from Chicago to Cincinnati and then Cincinnati to Phoenix, Arizona, where I spent a 5-year stint with them. And the first thing they did was they brought me back into technology and re-educated me. They put me back to school to get educated on technology. And really from there, I just went on and went up the ladder and did stints in dot-com companies, ran a venture capital, or not a venture capital, but a joint venture for Nortel. And at that time, that was a huge telecom company that I did a joint venture with. So I was owning my own company at that time and got into mergers and acquisitions. Throughout the whole time, I worked everything from help desk all the way to being a CTO and CIO where I'm currently sitting. So I spent 23 years in private sector and I spent the last 12 years in public sector.
Frank, thank you for all that. A lot of identification. I started out with compact computers. Those were my first. I had some computers prior to that. Remember in the attic of my old house that I used to mess around with. My buddy, his mom was an executive at Compaq. His dad was an executive at Microsoft. So we had like all this stuff and we would build local area networks. But then in college, I wanted to move to New York City and be a finance a-hole, just like kind of wear the suit, make lots of money. That's where my values were at 18, 19 years old. Studied that.
I think all of us were like that though. 18, 19, we're all like that.
Exactly. My journey, it ultimately brought me to the place that I'm at today. And so I wouldn't change anything. Years ago, I used to think back and be like, oh, if I would have done this, maybe I'd be like further ahead. I just stopped that. It's like, it's not particularly helpful to live in the past, right? Today, I have a lot of gratitude even for some of the gnarly things that happened because, again, they shaped the point that I'm at in my life today, which I'm extremely grateful for. I have a really beautiful life today. And I think based on as I've grown to better understand like the universe, if you will. I feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be in this moment.
Failure actually is the journey, right? It's a journey to success, right? You don't learn it too much until you go through it and then come out on the other side and realize that really made me a better human being. But most people never see that. They never, so that's pretty astute. I would imagine you're a lot younger than me and that you've seen that quickly. Some people go through their whole lives and never see that.
It took a lot of pain, honestly, because for me, like a lot of my perspective shifts, again, were forged out of pain. But now looking back on those situations, and so when I'm working with mentees or just talking on the podcast or on stage, whatever, I'm not shy about also talking about the fact that I truly don't know if a situation is good or bad. I try not to think of things in such black and white context because I don't know what's going to happen the next day. The situation could completely resolve itself. I've had so much experience now with going through the muck. And then, so today, as those things crop up, I'm able to deal with it with a level of peace of mind that I didn't know how to before because I was so convinced that it was bad. So I try to talk to people about how just try not to think about it that way.
100%.
And you spurred that thought talking about learning from failure. And again, I relate the word failure directly to innovation, right? We cannot innovate without failure is not bad, right? It's something that we go through to get to something better, right? So in that sense, thinking about your journey, where you started out again and where you're at today, is there a moment that sticks out in your mind when either a project failed or you had a rough go of it, but you ultimately took away like a good lesson that you might want to share?
I'm pretty sure it's all right to share it now because it was a pretty big blunder. When you succeed, I heard this from Bill Gates. I wish I could have claimed it as myself, but Bill Gates said success really doesn't really teach anything. All it does is teach you that whatever you're doing is you're right all the time, right? And then all of a sudden something happens where you fail and it's a great teacher because it tells you maybe you need to change. Maybe you need to focus on something different. One of the things in my life that I remember, and there's several times, it's not like just one failure. There's a couple of big ones, but this one was particular because I was one of those young, cocky consultants for Arthur Andersen. And at the time, I just had moved away from Arthur Andersen and took this joint venture with the partner that left with Nortel to start my own bravado and be exceptional consultant and make all this money in the world. And the second project, or pretty close to the first project, but back to back, pretty important project was a company called Dial Corporation. Of course, Dial was the soap right at the time, but Dial is no longer. There's a Dial, but I think they're owned by a German company now. And I think the reason why they're owned by a German company is probably because of my blunder. It was a huge project and there was several moving parts, and I was ahead of one part, which is all the quality assurance for the implementations and the integrations for this huge project, right? With all these different computer systems integrating, and it's Y2K, of course, at the time and everything. And my arrogance was that I could control everything that I can control within my realm and also for other people, make sure all the testing was done, but I could also control everything on the development side. And I got my nose into all that and try to direct all this. And what ultimately happened is that I fell flat on my face and the stock went down from like $7 or $8 a share down to, I think, 12 cents or something like that. And this German company actually bought out Dial because it was so low. And it was because of that failure of that project. It was a huge project. But funny story, years later, which is the irony of the situation, years later, I applied for a job with IBM. So IBM bought out a consulting practice, an ERP practice, which is basically a system, a large system, right? And an integrator. And that partner knew of that project. And he just wanted me for the interview just to laugh at me, kind of like that one movie with Jim Carrey where they just wanted the interview so they could laugh at him. Right. It's like, how can you be that stupid to implement a ERP system in 18 months when it's going to take 28 months or whatever. But I was so sure of myself. I was sure of everything I learned, right? Everything I've learned to that point when I was implementing that, I thought I knew it. And there's no way that could ever go away, but it did. So I learned a lot of lessons from that. The hubris of the moment should not overtake your better instincts, which is check, verify, and re-verify. Get your team involved. Make sure your team is involved with almost all your decisions. And so I learned a lot from that.
Icarus, right? You flew too close to the sun. I've been there, man. There's so many good parts to that. It's awful. I can only imagine. Brutal. But for me, when you first were starting out, just one of the words that popped out to me was control, right? The illusion of control. I've had to get really comfortable with the fact that there's a million things that are just outside of my control. I just cannot affect change. Now, like you said, towards the end, am I communicating? Am I enrolling people in what I'm doing and communicating outward? Is there a proper governance plan in place? Like all of those things, I think, are appropriate and can absolutely help in maybe addressing some of this stuff. But then for me, it's been an exercise in letting go of the rest because I can't control them over there and what they do and how they do it. It's just not going to happen, right? Like you mentioned, these huge enterprise projects, there's so many moving parts. So all I can do is what I can do. And I think that as a leader, I've also learned the value of how am I touching, moving, inspiring people to act, right? Because I've found that if I'm trying to manage and control everything, I can't really do it effectively other than what's in my little world. And B, it's not really effective at inspiring other folks to work with more rigor or align with the vision and mission of what we're doing and why we're doing it. I've taken those same lumps. So I get it, man.
Well, the thing I always tell people too when I'm mentoring other leaders is that the number one role of a leader, and we forget this because it's subtle, or at least it's not on your number one list when you wake up in the morning, is to create other good leaders. That's your responsibility because someone told me a long time ago, leadership is a choice. It's not a title. A lot of people think about promotion. When they promote, they say, oh, I'm a leader now. No, you have to choose. And when you choose to be a leader, that comes with it a lot of responsibility. And what people forget is they forget the other side of when you say, guess what, I'm a leader. They forget the other side. Oh, I have these responsibilities. And one of them is, and it's one that people often forget, and I always have to remind myself, I jot down on a daily journal, is that my role is to create other good leaders, not create other leaders, because there's a lot of leaders out there, and there's some that you probably ran across that are just not good. They're toxic, or whatever reason, they're just not good leaders, but for some reason they got the title. My goal as choosing to be a leader is to create other good leaders. And what does that look like? Selflessness, servant style leader that you want to listen to yourself when things are down. You want to have the same person speak to you when you need advice and whatnot. And so that's something that's a lost in the whole leadership process.
Yeah, no, 100%. And that was a hard lesson for me too, starting to scale the disruptive innovations. I remember I was having a conversation with my business coach about a colleague who I didn't feel was really like showing up the way that I wanted them to. I'm starting to pay these people more money. It's my money. You're not giving 100%. I wasn't leading as effectively as I needed to be. I wasn't spending the time to mentor and to help them grow. Because the other thing I found is each person is different. And the way that I need to lead each person, again, can be different depending on their personality type. Now, you're only one person, right? For me, I've had to develop something that's scalable. Granted, Disruptive Innovations is not a huge company, so I don't have too much trouble. But what it also made me think about was like, because you mentioned having a toxic leader, like a level of toxicity. There was an organization we were working with not too long ago that had an SVP level individual who was leading with that iron fist of, we need this done yesterday. We need this done yesterday. And it was trickling down all the time. Everybody's ass was on fire. And here we come in, and there's a lot of things they were doing very well fundamentally, but now they're trying to innovate. And the problem was that everyone was deathly afraid of making a mistake. They were just like so trepidatious, like, when was that hammer going to come down, that it led to a level of like inaction almost, or inertia in decision making, like where people were looking for that approval from someone or somewhere always for the next decision. Like it was always a level up or over here or over there. Because they weren't led, they didn't feel empowered to act. I feel like it's one of the biggest enemies to innovation today, is that like culture of fear or other aspects of culture, right, that act as an enemy to innovation.
Culture will always beat strategy. It usually beats almost anything you can imagine now, because of the mixture of X, Y, and all the other different generations right now. We have the most mix of those folks, of the most dynamic workforce right now than you've ever seen in history. You still have baby boomers still hanging around. I don't want to say, but you have that all the way down to Gen Zers, all the way in the job market with a lot of influence. So all those types of characteristics on each of those generations are getting their way, making their way through that big bubble of the job force. And so when you have that type of mix, you have to build the culture first. So you have to build a culture where everybody can say what their opinions, that the culture is educational in nature. In other words, failure is part of education. We don't belittle people for failing. We figure out, hey, what happened? What do we need to do to change it? And we create that culture where learning is the number one thing that we need to focus on. And so obviously gratitude, one of my biggest things is the gratitude side of it, but that's part of the whole culture that you create where, you know, all for one, one for all. And we go through this together, because don't forget, I'm sure you feel this way too, is learning is a bi-directional thing. Like I've learned more from my direct reports and the people I mentor just from listening to them, listening to where their perspectives are. I've learned more and have become a better leader because of that. And so having that culture of not fearing whoever's opinion is going to be different than mine, I can say it and I won't be looked down on or treated any differently, is super important of this mix that we have in the job market right now from all and their little, everybody's little things that they have within their generational component. We need to have that. It's hard though, because when you get mad though, because you have your own, right? So my generation has their thing. And so for one thing is funny, I always laugh, is everybody's chatting and I like calling. I'm a caller. Like I like to call people. And it's funny when you get the other ones, they're just always chatting. Text me. Like, I'll text. I'm all right with that, but I prefer to call someone.
I'm on the fence, right? Because like for a lot of things, I do prefer a call, but I also am apt to text or chat too. I digress. I do want to talk a little bit more about what you guys are up to, Arizona Child Services. I'm not super familiar with the types of like work you would be doing. So I'm excited to learn about that. Before we do, I just always like to ask favorite book or literary piece, either that you've read recently or one of your favorites all time, your choice.
Wow. Favorites. I like Moby Dick. I know that's something that people are like, hey, that's old school, but I like it. We all know he dies. There's a lot of lessons to learn. Chasing that whale sometimes is not the best thing. The reason why I like Moby Dick is it gives you that view of, here's a person that chased this huge whale, and then you're looking at it and he never caught it. But we all can like metaphorically see this in our life. We chase this huge thing, right? But there's a lot of little things to enjoy in the meantime that we don't, because we're always chasing this huge whale, right? And so that's, for me, is metaphoric, more like, sometimes just stop and see where you are. and enjoy where you are instead of always being so fixed on this whale that you may or may never catch. I'm not saying you shouldn't do it. I tell kids, my kids are like all dreamers. I'm a dreamer. I'm just saying that enjoy life as you go. Each part of life is really super, super fantastic, and enjoy that. Enjoy all those times to go through in between.
No, 100%. Again, a lesson and or perspective shift. And I mean, you've mentioned the word like gratitude a few times, right? So being grateful for what I have in this moment right now, that I get to sit here right now, because tomorrow's not promised, and not in a morbid way, but like in a like that's reality type of way. And in my experience too, like joy and like true happiness are rooted in like love and human connection. And that might seem obvious, right? But like, how am I appreciating that moment to moment? Again, I'm a dreamer, I'm an entrepreneur, like I love this stuff. But my experience is because earlier in my life, it used to be when I get here, then I'll be happy. Or like when I get this, then it'll be enough. It's like, it's never enough.
Actually, Matthew McConaughey did a great thing on that. He said the difference between joy and happiness is a quid pro quo, right? If I get this new sneaker or new car, I'm going to feel good about my life. And it never happens. You get the new car, and then, pretty soon you want something else. Whereas joy, you get to choose. Every day you get to choose everything in your day, whether to be joyful or not. And I think that was just such a powerful, I think he did that in one of the commencement speeches. I was like, wow, that's a powerful message for kids. Because so often we're like, are you happy? I'm like, I'm not sure if I want to be happy. I want to be joyful. I want to enjoy everything that comes towards me. And so very powerful though. I think that's what you're trying to get at though. Something that you determine. I can make this day to be great, or I can make it to be really lousy. Just the way I look at things.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's like the same thing with like when I've had these perspective shifts in life, my experience is that the circumstances of my life are nearly identical on either side of that moment, right? So it's like my circumstances haven't changed. It's just the way that I'm looking at things. It's crazy, man. But anyway, your current role, CIO, talk to me a little bit about your vision for child services and based on the overall mission of the organization, and then maybe some of the key things that you guys are working on.
Okay, well, the mission of the agency is, I want to say this because some people, when I say it in speeches, they say, oh my gosh, they misinterpret it. The mission is easy to understand. We protect kids. That's basically what it is, right? So sometimes they mistake when I say the mission's easy. No, the mission's not easy. The mission is not easy. The mission, to understand the mission, is very easy. It's to protect kids. And that's something that kind of got me going when I came here. I've only been here 2.5 years. I came from the wildlife management agency where I built their first wildlife management system. And so for me, when I was coming here, I thought I was saving the environment and animals. Now I'm going to save kids. Equal in some people's version, but for me, it was a step up. I have a chance to potentially alter a person's life. And so when I came here and that mission was pretty simple for me to understand, then I say, okay, what can I do with all the stuff that I have in my background? What can I actually do for them? And so we started creating, the idea of like, if we had all the money in the world, how would we approach this? So we have to innovate. The bottom line is, how do we make the frontline workers be more effective and affect more lives? That's basically how I interpreted my role, right? How do I do that through technology? And so for me, I created a plan that allowed for automating things that were redundant or bureaucratic in the systems that are very arcane, innovate areas where maybe we didn't think that we could innovate by recreating processes, automating some of those processes, maybe implementing some technology that allowed for innovation on outdated connections for courts or federal things, like child welfare. And the third thing, imagining the position of a social worker. If pie in the sky, what would a social worker do to be more productive? Because how do we impact the family and the child so that we don't have these problems? And so we created that, I like to call it the AIR strategy. And so how do you do that? Well, you go out in the technology world and you find what will do this quickest. And of course, we became enamored with AI, Gen AI, agentic AI, and those tools that allow us to triple ourselves, triple our resource, reduce the burden for that frontline worker to do so much of the mundane stuff and allow them to have more time because there's a direct correlation. We know there's a direct correlation. If a frontline worker has more time with families and a child, the outcome is usually good. The less time they have doing that, the more chances that outcome is not going to be good or the way we want it to be. So we focus on trying to give them more time to where the area is most needed, which is the time with the family and the child.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. And I love how tied you are to the mission because I like to think that's the same reason we got involved in healthcare. And now we're talking to some federal agencies because to play a small role in affecting change in that way is exciting and it's something worth doing. We see a lot of the failure rates. Like I know like MIT has that recent study with 95% of AI POCs fail and blah, blah, blah.
It's actually a
Um,
full study, though.
I heard
You
that.
know, it's a long story, but it's not actually a good study. Surprisingly, from MIT, you would think it would be, but they didn't do a good Smith sampling.
But you could go back to good old McKinsey, and look at the fact that like over the past like 20 years, like 70-80% of like digital transformation initiatives fail. What has been the difference in your mind in getting some of these projects off the ground? Like, for example, I've seen in the healthcare world that when people can get their arms around a use case, and I don't need to teach someone like the inner workings of a large language model or a small language model, or like I want to educate them enough, but at the same time, it needs to be something consumable. So when ambient listening started becoming really prevalent and digital leaders like us went to these docs and said, listen, this thing's going to listen to your conversation. It's going to transcribe it. It's going to summarize it. And then you're going to press a button after you review it and it's going to upload to the EHR automatically. And they're like, this is awesome. And then like it caught like wildfire because like you were saying, it really affected the way that these people were working and their ability to do their jobs. It cut down on unnecessary work. Have you seen the fruits of the labor yet, like in any pockets or in any of the projects that you guys have done?
Oh, yeah. I mean, there's hours that are given back to. We have a whole statistic of metrics that we can give. I can tell you that if there's 1 hour in a day that was contributed to bureaucracy, that's probably diminished for almost 70% of our folks. So we're getting into the 70s. Now, that's in the control group. So we have a control group because the thing that you asked me originally, how do you make sure that AI projects don't fail like the 95% MIT study says? And I would go back to my Moby Dick reference, but I also throw in something else. You can't boil the ocean, right, to get the fish, right? So what we do is we chunk these things into manageable little case studies, for a lack of a way of saying it. And we try to come up with what specific problem are we trying to solve? That specific, not 100 bullet points. What problem are we doing it? And we have a process to go from intake all the way to approval to get to production, right? There's this process. And at any point in that process, if we feel that the risk is not worth the reward, we stop doing it and we go somewhere else. But here's a great thing about AI that no one knows. Maybe a few people are in it. AI, when you're doing it, when you're developing, even if you're using Copilot Development Studio or you're using OpenAI directly, the ChatGPT or anything like that, or customizing any of the large language models, right? If you're using any of that stuff, what people don't realize is when you're doing these development projects or just tool development projects, solutions projects, that at any given time when you stop, that's not wasted code. That code has already been done for something that we're doing, we potentially wanted to fix, right? A lot of the algorithms and when you're creating that are often can be reused in another problem set that that is presented to you by your team. Not like the old days when you're developing programming language. The programming language was for specific problem that you were solving. If you got halfway through and it wasn't working, you had to throw all that code out and start from scratch. This is not the same way. AI is not built that way. So that allows us to scale quickly if we have more solutions that we need and do it with less money. So it's almost like you can continue to go down these extraordinary avenues with almost limitless thought on how to solve things.
I love how you keyed on, like, let's start with a problem that we're looking to solve. I had Richard Zane, Chief Transformation Officer at UC Health in Colorado, and he was talking about the exact same concept. And he took it to that end. He also said, listen, the other thing is, like, some of these problems that we have, people have solved. Certain ones we need to innovate ourselves and figure out how to solve it. If somebody has solved it already, for the lack of a better word, like, copy what they did and not reinvent the wheel, which makes sense to me. And now maybe there's a way to make it your own or whatever, but yeah, no, it's good stuff. I'm impressed because, a lot of the time when I think of federal or state agencies, I think clusterfuck, like,
Hey, I thought the same way before I got into it.
yeah. And actually we have two disruptive innovators, veterans now in place as CIOs in federal agencies, which makes me feel good because I feel, and now a third, that I have people that I believe in affecting change, affecting our tax dollars at work, right? Because you're making our money go further, which I really appreciate.
Yeah. That's the funniest thing too. I remember getting involved and I go off into speaking engagements and the look on people's face when they say where I work and stuff. And then I go off and I do a lecture on AI or something like that. And I get off the stage and they're like, I mean, I was over close to MIT. IBM has a huge thing called IBM Think. I was doing a lecture over there and the MIT folks came over and goes, who the hell are you? You know what? You work for the state of Arizona Department of Child Safety. But surprising, I will say this, what's shocking to me is there's a plethora of folks that are highly innovative coming down the pipe, now coming out of college, that want to get into government work. So the hopefulness of us continuing on this innovation trail is just, I am so pumped up. I have so many people, when I go to college campuses, they say, like, I want to do something. I want to do something for society. I want to help humans and advance, like you say, the amplified intelligence and whatnot. And so I'm incredibly pumped up about the future, really getting involved. They're really more than probably the past.
No, for sure. For sure. Frank, I could probably talk to you for another hour, but we're almost up on time. My last question for you would be just if you could go back 5, 10, 15 years in time, what advice would you give your younger self?
Patience. Everything comes with patience. A lot of times we try to hurry things and they're not your time. And also, when someone else is their time, be there for them. A lot of times when we go through our careers, we're so focused on things that are out of our control or we want it now. It's the now generation. That's never changed. Everybody wants things now. But just having patience and realize that everything in life comes to you sooner or later if you keep focusing on it and having due diligence to work for it.
Amen. Frank, this was amazing. Really appreciate your time. Thank you so much. And to our listeners, thank you for tuning in. We'll catch you all next week.
Thank you for listening to the Disruptive Innovators Champions of Digital Business podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a 5-star review and subscribe to enjoy future episodes. This episode is brought to you by Disruptive Innovations, a leading tech consulting firm that helps enterprise organizations with their IT strategy, process optimization, and workflow improvement. Contact them and find out more at disruptiveinnovations.net.